Good morning and welcome to a Euractiv debate supported by Velex. Now, this morning we'll be discussing sustainable and healthy buildings and reaching the goals of the EU Green Deal. A big thank you, of course, to everyone who is joining us online this morning. And a reminder, if you have a question or comment, don't forget to send it into our chat page, along with the name of the panelist. It's Rex that will pick out some of your questions for later on in the programme, so do get involved. Now, we spend so much time indoors. Just look at all of us right now. I'm happy to moderate this debate from the comfort of my own home. Now, stats say that we spend 90% of our time indoors. Now, that might sound a little bit crazy, perhaps, but just think about it. Unless you have an outdoors profession, it's actually on the money. So the places that we choose to spend our time in should be fit for us. They should also be fit for the future and for the environment, so more sustainable. Now, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive is being reformed so that the places that we live, work and play in can play their role in helping to reduce emissions by 55% by 2030, so then delivering on the EU Green Deal. Now, the reform isn't just about energy efficiency or even zero emission buildings. It's about creating a better environment that improves quality of life and reduces something very important, energy poverty, something that really couldn't come sooner given the fact that we are living through an energy crisis right now. Now, you're going to hear a lot about the revision of the Buildings Directive and what could or should be on the cards. But before we hear from our panelists, let's set the scene with David Briggs, CEO at Velex, for a presentation of an impact study on the Healthy Homes Barometer. Now, that study says that 1 out of 4 Europeans are exposed to indoor climate hazards. What's that all about? Well, let's find out more. David?
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Marianne. And also a warm welcome, obviously, from my side to all of the guests who are able to join us today. It's an honour to be able to address you. So, I mean, as everybody knows, and as we talk about frequently, we are at a crucial turning point. And the IEA, I think, recently concluded, it was in its March report, that basically the world has not heeded the call for a sustainable recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. And we're also currently not on track to build back better, nor to meet our climate objectives. An important solution for this, of course, is to decarbonize our building stock. Around 40% of all of the energy that we use in the world is related to the buildings that we live in. This is why the legislative work on the Fit for 55 legislative package is so crucial. But for us, it's not just about decarbonizing our building stock. We can also use this opportunity to kill two birds with one stone, as it were, and to create much better living conditions for all of the people in Europe. Buildings, as you said earlier, Marianne, I mean, are absolutely crucial to our lives. And the primary purpose of a building is, of course, to keep us warm, comfortable, sheltered, and safe. In that respect, it's rather shocking, especially knowing, as you said, that we spend 90% of our lives inside buildings. 90%, something which became acutely clear to people during the COVID-19 crisis. I think this crisis also highlighted the need for and the importance of healthy buildings. In the energy efficiency first principle that the European Commission published, they identified health as one of the most important co-benefits of energy efficiency, but they also acknowledged at the same time that there was a lack of available data to better assess and to quantify these multiple benefits. And that's a gap that at Velex we have tried to begin to address. I don't pretend that we have all of the data, and more research is certainly required, but actually since 2015, every year we have been producing a report written together with independent consultancies, which this year it was with RAND Europe, a non-profit policy research organization. And these reports focus very much on creating sustainable buildings for resilient societies. And so before you zoom in on the policy discussions, which I know you're going to discuss later, I'd like to share a couple of the key findings. So if you could move to the next slide for me, that would be very helpful. Thank you. One of the key findings, as you said, is actually that 1 in 3 Europeans are affected by excess noise, cold, damp, and mold, and lack of daylight in their homes. And in total, that's around 163 million people who are affected by one or more of those problems within the houses in which they live. That's the equivalent of the populations of Germany, Spain, UK, although perhaps the UK is less relevant now. They decided to leave Europe stupidly, but nevertheless, it's not just either a few isolated areas in Europe that are affected by this. Poor indoor climate affects people all the way from Portugal in the west through to the Baltics in the east, and it's not either necessarily just the poorer countries which are the worst affected. That is, of course, an element. But I can say, for example, I'm speaking to you from Denmark. Denmark actually only arrives in the middle of the table of healthy homes, and has the average amount of unhealthy homes of the European society, despite being one of the richest societies in Europe. And the related health impacts are pretty well known. They include asthma, respiratory problems, cardiovascular disease. But these latest study also shows a very strong link between poor indoor climate and people's general health and well-being. Previous reports have also firmly and very conclusively established the link between a healthy indoor climate, and particularly the access to daylight, for productivity and for learning, for example, in schools. And although I won't touch on that today, it's additional benefits that are clearly documentable in terms of fixing the difficulties of poor housing, and also poor working offices and factories and conditions in many respects. If you could go to the next slide for me, please. The research we have done is very clear that the restoration of buildings, not only is it an essential part of the green recovery, the cheapest and the cleanest energy that you use is the energy that you don't waste, or that you don't use at all. So energy efficiency should absolutely be at the forefront of our efforts in our green transition. But the benefits of, at the same time as we renovate houses for better insulation, the benefits to our society of equally investing in improving the conditions of those houses are also clear. And the cumulative effects of investing in healthier homes, in terms of direct healthcare savings, but also improved health, improved productivity, they are conservatively, and I say conservatively, estimated at around 600 billion euros by 2050. And of course, you can and will receive a full copy of the report, and you'll discuss the methodology of those calculations. But 600 billion euros in context, of course, as you will know, that's well over half the investments that are expected to be needed to realize the European Green Deal's objectives. So this is not an insignificant matter in terms of the health of people, nor the financial benefits when the holistic picture is taken into account. If you could go to the final slide, and I'll just conclude with a few remarks. Obviously, the challenge from our perspective is pretty easy to spot. If we have the right focus, then the EU can definitely ensure a sustainable, a resilient, an energy efficient building stock, but one which is also healthy and affordable for people to live in. And the new data clearly shows that health is not an add-on or a nice to have, but it's an intrinsic part of the value of energy efficient buildings. So our push and our plea is to really make sure that when we have the opportunity and the obligation to decarbonize our buildings, we should also take this opportunity to create well-being for the people and for planet by transforming those spaces into healthier places where people feel better, are healthier, and also more productive and learn easier. It's an opportunity to do both of these things at the same time at a significantly reduced cost than if we decouple and separate the issues. So that's a super brief introduction to the key findings of our Healthy Homes Barometer of this year, which again we are very happy to share with everybody. Also all of the supporting data to the degree that it can be useful, and I hope it's food for thought for you. I'm looking forward then to listening into as much of the debate as I am able, following up on this. So thank you for that.
No, thank you, and definitely, I think everyone will be listening to what you're saying, that this is an opportunity and that health should be as an add-on when we look at reforming this legislation. Before you go, I would like to ask you one question, because I know that you are quite busy. You talked about 163 million people being affected by 4 indoor hazards that you identified. So just to go back, and then the lack of daylight, damp, mold, and noise, cold. But if there's any way to sort of quantify this, which of these would you say needs to be addressed first? Which is the worst when it comes to our mental and physical well-being?
I'm originally a salesman, so I'd be tempted to say lighter, because that will that will require more windows. But that isn't fair. It's actually it is a little difficult, and I think we perhaps lack the data to be definitive on an answer of that. The situation changes a little bit from country to country, depending on the climate. It also changes on whether you're living in an urban area or in the countryside, for example. And of course, it is very often that these 4 elements go hand in hand. They come together. Light and ventilation and is a big part of the problem of damp and mold, for example, and poor housing is often located in the areas which are cheaper to build, which impacts on the noise, and so on. So it is a little bit difficult, I would say, to separate or rank them differently. What we do know is that the people who are exposed to all 4 of those indoor climate hazards, they're almost 4 times more likely than the average to report poor health compared to those in a good indoor climate. 4 times more likely to report poor health. And if you look at the mental well-being, it's even worse, actually, because again, those people living with all 4, they're 5 times more likely to feel unhappy and to suffer from symptoms of depression and poor mental health, I would say. So that's not it's not an easy answer of yes, just fix one and you've taken 80% of the problems away. I wouldn't be serious of me to say that, because I don't think we have quite sufficient research to do that. But at least here in Blitz, we'd be very happy to contribute to further research on those issues. I think it's a superly important societal issue. So.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I think definitely the pandemic and the lockdowns that so many countries and people around the world had to face really showed us that the place that we live really needs to be fit for purpose, a place that we enjoy and that we can enjoy with our families. David Briggs, thank you so much for joining us and for making for making that statement for us. Thank you so much.
If I could just add to that, Marion, I mean, I agree.
Yes,
the pandemic has shown something in obviously people are focused on the comfort of their home and that has been a good thing. But we've also gone back to a fundamental thing, which perhaps we'd forgotten, and you know, we've recognised that airing out a home all the way through the year, opening the windows, letting the air circulate, is a very efficient and very crucial part of avoiding, you know, that allergy-borne or airborne particles like COVID stay in the house. And the temptation when you go for energy efficiency, if you want to be the most energy efficient, then, you know, make the walls thick. Don't put any light into it. Don't ventilate it. Keep the heat in. All of these things are good for energy efficiency, but they are extraordinarily detrimental to people's health and well-being. So we have to find that right balance, and I think COVID has definitely also shown that these things go hand in hand.
They really do. Okay, well, thank you so much for being part of the debate this morning. Thank you so much, David. Thank you so much. Okay, well, time now to introduce our panelist of experts. So joining me for this debate, we have Thibault Roy, Policy Officer at DGN at the EU Commission. We also have Danish Renew Europe MEP Morten Petersen, who is also Vice Chair of ITRE Committee at the European Parliament. We also have Martin Pezhrimovsky, Energy and Atomic Issues Attaché at the Czech Permanent Representation to the EU, Adeline Rocher, Senior Policy Advisor at think tank E3G, and Elizabeth Hoffman, EU Public Affairs Manager at Velex. Thank you to you all. Now, today, we're going to be changing things up just a little bit. Some of our panelists do, of course, have some limited time. So before I go to all of the panelists, to introduce themselves, first of all, I'm going to bring in Martin Pezhrimovsky, Energy and Atomic Issues Attaché at the Czech Permanent Representation to the EU. So it's a bit of a mouthful. Please do take the floor for a few minutes to introduce yourself.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. Also, thank you very much for pronouncing my surname so nicely. It's a challenge even for many Czech people. So you did a great job there. I'm extremely sorry for having only a limited time, because we are actually having another round of negotiations of the EPBD today in just a few minutes in the council. So this is something that is happening right now. And with that said, I would like to thank company Velux for presenting the results of the study, because the timing is perfect, and now is the time and the opportunity to inform the stakeholders, the member states and the members of the European Parliament and the Commission about the potential benefits of renovations of buildings for health as well as energy efficiency. So with that said, I would like to just point out a few things that will be the most exciting from my point of view. We have a tremendous potential to do something great for the European building stock now, with the EPBD being on the table. And what we have to focus on is to maintain the coherence and to look at this file, at this legislation in a holistic manner, if I may quote the previous speaker. I think that the EU as such is now approaching the building sector in the most holistic manner ever. We have the Commission communication on the renovation wave, which was followed by the Council conclusions on the renovation wave. Then the Cabinet of the President von der Leyen issued the communication on the European Bauhaus. So this all was a strong lead up to opening the legislation on the renovation of buildings, and I think that it only proves that now the building sector is on the top priority of the stakeholders from many backgrounds, and we are approaching this issue from many points of view, including culture, health, the history and the future, the digitalization, and of course the energy consumption and emissions. So what we'll be looking to do in the Council is that we'll try to craft the legislation in a way that is flexible, but at the same time ambitious. We need to step up the renovation rate. That's something that we agree on. And we'll be looking for new tools to incorporate into the legislation that would allow for speeding up the renovations and for rolling out new and innovative solutions to the challenges that we are facing and to the challenges that the previous speaker described so nicely about. Let's focus on having flexibilities. Let's focus on using the strength of the member states. Let's give them enough ways how to take advantage of the specific climate conditions, specific cultural conditions, as well as we should also, I think, try to develop a framework that will allow for preserving the cultural and historical treasures that we have in the EU, because psychology is an important part, as it was nicely mentioned in the first presentation. And being able to live in a beautiful historical center with beautiful historical buildings or a character of which is maintained is, I think, something that would be only beneficial for the mental health of the European population. So just a little thing regarding the historical building and the possible solutions there. What will be extremely exciting is the digital tools and the research that is going into this area, because the buildings of the future will be smarter than ever before. We will roll out new devices that will help us to drive the consumption down, that will help us to make buildings not just passive consumers of energy, but also active players within the electricity grid. For that, we need a lot of skilled people. We need to really focus on how to get those people to the market, to the job market, how to work with students, how to work with universities, etc., so that we in the EU are the global leader when it comes to smart solution for buildings. Now it's not just a matter of a healthy lifestyle and lowering the consumption. Now it's actually a matter of the EU energy security as such, because every piece of energy that we don't need to use, every piece of or every molecule of gas that we don't need to burn is a great news for the EU, and will contribute to our well-being and will help us to have a little bit lighter sleep. So with that said, I'm looking forward to the discussion. I hope that it will lead to productive outcomes, and I massively apologize for being forced to leave you, but I have the negotiations. I have a negotiation to run, and yes, looking forward to the Czech presidency also. Hopefully we'll be able to close a general approach, which would then open the way for the Swedish presidency to start the trialogues with the respected members of the European Parliament. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Do I have quickly just a few moments just to ask you a few questions or not, or do you really have to leave?
Yes, definitely. Go ahead.
Okay, please. Oh, fantastic. Okay, so I'm glad that you brought up the fact that, of course, you will take over the rotating EU Council presidency. I've been reading up on what the sort of goals of your presidency are. I'm glad, of course, that you do highlight the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive and the kind of reform that you're looking to make within that. But from what I can understand, your presidency is going to be focusing on banking and finance. So where then does this legislative reform really fit into the goals and ambitions? And what do you think you can get done then in 6 months?
That's a great question. I mean, we are still now in the hands of the French presidency, and to a large extent, it will depend on how successful they will be. We will, of course, or we are actually doing anything and everything we can to help the French to be as successful as possible and to fulfill their goals, so that then we can focus on delivering on the targets that we set in our national documents and the general outlooks that we have presented. But this is a challenging question, and I think the next month will be crucial, and it will inform us on what is and what isn't possible during our presidency. Yes, probably not as specific answers as you would hope for, but I really need to be careful here. Sorry.
No worries at all. No worries at all. Always a politician. Okay, so I mean, currently we're suffering through so many different crises. We've had the pandemic, the effects of which we're still all feeling. Obviously, there's a war in Ukraine, and the ripple effects across the world have been felt. Energy crisis, living crisis. So with all of these things that are taking place, and affecting all of us as a kind of global community, as I was saying to the CEO of Velex, David Briggs, the homes that we live in are becoming, or the spaces that we occupy really, are becoming ever more important. So what would you say that the pandemic has really shown you from within your country about the kind of conditions that your people are living in, and how you can transport that into any sort of legislative reform?
It's a good thing to approach the overall living conditions holistically. I think that would be the main outcome, or one of the lessons that we have learned, because if a person is living in an apartment with devices that are energy inefficient, then every time that person switches those appliances on, every time the person switches on the heating, a negative feedback loop is basically happening in the mind of that person, saying that, hey, electricity is getting more expensive than ever before. Perhaps I shouldn't really, heat up the building to the level that I was used to before. Perhaps I should, think about the consumption. It's something that will help us to advocate for energy efficiency and for behavioral measures that will drive the consumption of energy down, which makes the planet as such more sustainable. But at the same time, we need to think really about the impact and the emotional impact on the person, on the individual person. And we need to do our best to make sure that person that is regardless of their income level and regardless of their the area where they live in, that they really feel that we are doing the best so that they can enjoy the life in the most comfortable way possible. And this is something that informs the policymaking. This is something that is leading the politicians into discussing various forms of tackling energy poverty and handling vulnerable handling the issue of the vulnerable consumers in different ways than ever before. The solutions that we are now discussing are more complex than ever before, and we are in a lucky position because the EPBD has been open before the crisis. So now we can actually still inform the legislative process and take into account all the lessons that we are learning through this crisis to make the EPBD future-proof, and to also approach the whole Fit for 55 package in a more holistic manner than we would have ever imagined when this was published on the day of the Bastille, on the 14th of July. Yes, this is something.
These things that I think everyone, all actors, will need to find in this. I'm going to let you go in. So Martin Peshimovsky, Energy and Atomic Issues Attorney at the Czech Permanent Representation to the EU. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope your meeting goes well. Thank you so much for being part of this panel discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Goodbye.
Thank you so much. Okay, well then let's now hear from the rest of our panel. Thank you, of course, for all standing by. Let's go in order of introduction. Okay, let's start with Thibault Roy, Policy Officer at DGN at the EU Commission. If you'd like to take the floor to introduce yourself, please do.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Mariam, and thank you to Euractiv for organizing this very topical event. I also want to thank David for presenting those data on quality of life and key issues in buildings. And also thank you to Martin for reminding us about the importance of ensuring coherence between the different files of the Fit for 55 package. And also after the French presidency of the Council, with the Czech presidency to steer the work, hopefully to an ambitious proposal, ambitious updates on the EPBD proposal of the Commission. In the wake of Russia's invasion and the current war in Ukraine, saving energy is the cheapest, safest, and cleanest way to reduce our reliance on fossil fuel imports. And using less energy also obviously underpins the clean energy transition. As you recalled, buildings account for 40% of energy consumed and about 1/3 of energy-related greenhouse gas emissions in the EU. And therefore, in line with the renovation wave strategy, the proposal for the revision of the EPBD adopted in December aims to more than double the rate of renovation, but also to increase their depth, to contribute to the minus 55% GHG emission by 2030 and to net zero emissions by 2050. And the renovation of existing buildings is the core of the EPBD revision proposal, with ambitious measures such as on minimum energy performance standards, so on MEPS. In the Commission, we have carefully drafted the EPBD proposals so that it has a positive impact, not only on energy consumption or GHG emissions, but also on affordability and quality of life. And as we all know, we shape our buildings, but our buildings also shape us. And the renovation of worse performing buildings, in particular, thanks to the proposal on EPS, is a key way to make our buildings healthier by addressing leaking roofs, damp, moisture, ventilation, and thermal comfort, and at the same time reduce energy bills. It also helps, obviously, lifting people out of energy poverty. And I also want to say that in addition to the proposal on MEPS, we have introduced several measures in the EPBD proposal to contribute to making our buildings healthier. And they pertain in particular to reporting, information, advisory tools, and financing as well. I will stop here for now and looking forward to the discussion.
Okay, thank you so much, Thibault Roy. It's good that you said there that, our buildings really shape us. I think that's really important because, these are the places, as we heard from David Briggs, we spend 90% of our time indoors. So, of course, that's a hugely important point to make. And, of course, we hear about, all the reforms, the fact that renovation is really key to what the European Commission wants to do with this reform. But let's now go over to MEP Morten Petersen to take the floor.
Thank you so much, Mariam. Good morning, everybody, and thanks a lot for these great interventions. I must say I'm surprised by the magnitude of benefits that David Briggs was talking about previously. A third of Europeans being affected, and the benefits from renovation. And I believe he said somewhat like in the tune of 600 billion euros in benefits by 2050 if we do this right. And apart from this, adding all the benefits in terms of indoor climate and health considerations, I think overall makes it a overwhelming case in terms of renovating the buildings and the negotiations that we have ahead of us. But if I may just take one step back, I think what is happening now with the terrible tragedy and events in Ukraine, that we're all scrambling for also what to do in the short term. And here renovation issues are extremely important. And I think the entire issue of energy efficiency first, and then renovation of buildings are now becoming issues of strategic security interest for Europe at large. So we tend to focus a lot on generating more renewables, green electricity, which we ought to and which we should. But in the very short term, what we for sure can do is to renovate buildings and ensure that we apply energy efficiency first principles in this. Because this will, at the end of the day, save us a lot of Russian gas imports, as well as accompanying greenhouse gas emissions. So there's so much going for an ambitious energy performance of buildings directive revision. And I think that the moment is right, the timing is right in order to do so. Let me just touch upon a couple of other issues that I think should be in there when we get to negotiating this important file with member states. I think we have an issue of durability of our buildings. I think we have issues on life cycle approaches to also incorporating building materials in order to ensure that we do it as green as possible, so to say. So we need to have a more holistic approach. I think we have issues surrounding the entire eco-labeling system in order to ensure that when we renovate, we do it as efficient as possible and as green as possible. Digital issues will also be very much at the forefront, given that in order to reduce our energy consumption, I mean, digitalization and renovation goes hand in hand, and we have so many great cases and examples out there basically showing that the payback periods are obviously, with the spike in energy prices, getting lower and lower when renovating houses and buildings and when applying energy efficiency measures. So all this to say, Miriam, that I think time is right for debates like the ones that we're having this morning. We will very soon be negotiating this important file in European Parliament, and then end of year, start of next year, presumably be negotiating with the member states. And this will not be easy, even though the benefits seem so obvious, as is the case, because you have a lot of member states out there that would say, okay, why is this a European approach? Why do we need a pan-European approach to this? Why not let member states regulate on their own? So this would be a very principled discussion also, because I truly and firmly believe that there are pan-European benefits by having common standards in a lot of these issues. But just to warn you and to flag that there will be very serious disagreements and discussions on this file as well. So watch out and look out. It's going to be very intense and dramatic over the next year or so. Thanks.
Yeah, no doubt they would be. I think it's important to point out there, you know, the sort of pan-European approach versus the member state approach. And I liked how you, sorry, my voice is going a little bit here. I liked how you said that, you know, we shouldn't be scrambling for short-term solutions, that, you know, whatever reform that is going to end up in this piece of legislation actually has the right kind of impact for the future, you know, that we use the right kind of materials on buildings and we create the buildings that are, of course, best for people to live, work and play in. Okay, let's now go over to Adeline Rocher, Senior Policy Advisor at think tank E3. Please do take the floor. I think you are muted, potentially, if you would like to unmute yourself.
Yes, very sorry for that, but I think it's the
Perfect.
modern age. It's what happened now.
No worries, no worries.
So thank you very much for inviting me to participate to this discussion today. It's been said that it's very timely, very important. I did have a few messages that I wanted to stress today, but MEP Peterson already said a few of them. So I'm very happy to see that I share most of his messages, but I still do have some things to say. First of all, I think it's great to see that there is this common agreement on the need for a holistic approach, because you can't isolate climate, health, and social benefits. And it's something that I believe the Green Deal was initially designed for. It was to really improve the whole of society in Europe, and the resilience plan that followed were also in that line of not addressing single problems in silo, because we know that doesn't work, but really have a broad perspective to make sure that sustainability happens in the entire society. I wanted also to stress that it's important to focus on EPBD, because that's a very near-term policy file, but it's really about the Green Deal, because there are other texts that will have provision that are important for the quality and livability of the buildings in Europe. For instance, the Energy Efficiency Directive that contains a lot of provisions also on heating and cooling, are critical to the indoor air quality. There is the construction product regulation as part of the circular economy package that also has provisions on the quality of materials. And it's not only about energy performance of the material, it's also about do they contain volatile organic compounds or not. It's not yet in the regulation, but I believe should be regulated by the EU. And I think it's very important to have that pan-European framework to ensure that it unlocks benefits for the single market, and ensures some equality of all EU citizens regarding the quality of their buildings, because not all building stock have the same starting point, but we do want all buildings in Europe to be clean, sustainable, healthy, and comfortable. Another point I wanted to make was that it's really important, I think, to see renovation as an investment for the future. The Commission has estimated that 275 additional billion euros a year would be needed to really achieve the goals of the renovation wave. But there's still 112 billion euros a year spent in Europe on fossil fuel subsidies only. So I'm only speaking about subsidies, which are a direct cost for public authorities in Europe. We've discussed at length also about the cost on public health systems. Direct costs on public health system are around 200 billion a year. So how you prioritize the public support, where do you direct your investments, and how do you want to spend the EU taxpayers' money is also very important. And I don't think there is a lack of resource. I think there is a question of how do you reorient the resource when they can deliver the most benefits for the long term. I will stop there, but I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Rocher. And it was really good that you pointed out there that 200 billion, of course, is a cost to the healthcare system, and perhaps this legislative reform can do something to maybe help that situation. Okay, and then to our last panelist now, Elizabeth Hoffman. Please do take the floor for a few minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of the important points have already been made, but I think one thing is clear, that buildings are not just part of a problem that will cost us a lot of money in the coming months and years, but that they represent a real opportunity, but only if we start treating energy efficiency as the first fuel. So very much looking forward to the Repower EU plans tomorrow on that front. But also, as was mentioned also by David before, if we introduce a more holistic approach to buildings, and that means factoring in all relevant building parameters, energy, environment, and health, so that we really make sure that the decarbonization of buildings also goes hand in hand with the improvement of living conditions. And that's really important, because when the indoor climate is ignored, renovations can actually lead to either unexpected increased energy demands, or also the need for increased cooling needs, because summer comfort or daylight were actually not factored in, because at the moment the focus when planning renovations is very much just on the energy performance side of things. So that's why very good that the EPBD proposal is broadening the scope. What we would like to see certainly is also a stronger focus on the benefits of passive building systems, and factoring that in a bit more. And when it comes to health and comfort, there is several good proposals in the Commission draft to better factor in. a healthy indoor climate. And that's a good starting point. But we do need to take a step further and start enshrining multiple benefits also in the new building tools, but also in the definitions. Because when we look at how we define at the moment a zero emission building, the focus is very much just on the operational side and very much just on energy. And when we talk about the multiple benefits, most of the times it's just linked to recommendations, encouraging member states to take action. So so that will be very important to address. And just one final remark. We don't have many opportunities to actually get it right, because we know that building owners on average are only undertaking like big renovation projects every 20 to 30 years. So if we either set a very low ambition at the beginning, or we take a too narrow approach when planning the renovation project, that can lead to non-desired outcomes, but also create lock-in effects for the inhabitants of the buildings that then have to live with it for several years. But I'll end here. And look forward to the discussion now.
Okay, thank you so much. I think it's important there that you said that the European Commission can go beyond the operational. Okay, well, since you brought them up, let's now kick off the debate with all of you, and I'll go straight to Thibault Roy. So you said that 80% of buildings will be standing by 2050 when the EU needs to be climate neutral. And this was something that you retweeted from your own Energy Commissioner, Kadri Simpson. Now, the revision of this directive obviously comes at a time and you're looking at sustainability from a different angle. So is a fresh approach really needed if we're going to hit that target of reducing emissions by 55%?
Thank you for the question. Very, very, very important one. What we think is that the EPBD proposal is a key element of the Fit for 55 package to reach the 2030 target of reaching minus 55% GHG emissions by 2030. But as recalled by other speakers, it is not the only proposal in that regard. And obviously it has very important interlinkages with other proposals, such as the Energy Efficiency Directive, the EED, which also has a target of reducing energy consumption compared to baseline scenario by 2030. It also has a lot of interlinkages. I don't want to go into too much detail, but with the Renewable Energy Directive proposal, which also includes a target of 40% of renewable energy at EU level by 2030. And there you see the interlinkages because in the EPBD proposal, we promote as much as possible the use of renewable energy in the buildings. For example, in our proposal on zero emission building, we require the new buildings by 2030 to emit zero operational GHG emissions. And so for the energy that still has to be used, even if the total amount is very low, it has to be covered by renewable energy. So it feeds into the 40% target of the RED proposal. Other pieces of legislation were mentioned. Obviously, very recently, the Commission adopted its proposal on eco-design for sustainable products, which aims at targeting not only the fundamental energy consumption part of appliances that we use, such as boilers in particular, but also their life cycle emissions and their life cycle impacts on top of the energy consumption in use. And that also feeds into the work that we try to carry out as part of the EPBD. If I can say one more word also on the level of ambition for 2030 and 2050. In the current context, with the invasion of Ukraine, and as will probably be made more detailed in the Repower plan, which will be adopted tomorrow, we believe it's extremely important that measures related to building, and in particular the proposals which are part of the EPBD, are taken up, discussed very thoroughly, and that the level of ambition remains high on the proposal. And so we're happy to hear what MEP Peterson says on the ambition in the Parliament, and we are happy to obviously to support in whatever way we can the co-legislators in that regard. In the context of Repower, maybe a last word, it is very important to target insulation of buildings, obviously addressing the worst performing buildings as a priority for two main reasons. The first being that energy poor citizens, for most of them, live in those buildings, those of energy performance class G or F mainly. So renovating those buildings has a direct impact on their health on top of their energy bills. But also, we also support the rollout of really renewable powered energy sourcing, such as heat pumps. You know that in the communication Repower that we adopted in March, we aim at doubling the rate of installation of heat pumps. So that would be really targeted together with the installation of our homes to provide the most, let's say, cost-optimal way forward. First of all, to meet our GHG and energy consumption targets, but also for the benefit of citizens overall.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Roy. Okay, well then let's go over to our MEP, Mr. Morten Peterson. So we heard a lot there from our representative from the European Commission about really what's on the cards, you could say, for this reform. But I want to also pick up on what we heard, towards the beginning of this debate, and it was something that you also touched upon, the fact that, the most unfortunate of us are really living in, well, let's just say, horrible conditions that affect their mental and physical well-being. Do you really believe, and is the Parliament going to try to push that this legislative reform is really going to make an impact on people's lives and let them live in a space where they are comfortable, where their health is taken care of, and that it really should be a right for everyone, and it isn't dependent on how much income you have, that everyone deserves the right to live in basic security and health?
Well, I think the argument has a lot going for it. Obviously, it's difficult just to say that everybody has a right to whatever, because there will be huge financial implications of this on a member state level. But I think it's fair to say that this issue is gaining prominence, and for very good reason. And again, just taking a step back, I think most of us have, under the Corona lockdown, been at home for like 2 years now, doing a lot of our work virtually, realizing essentially how important it is to be in a home where things work and where you have a healthy environment. So apart from all the benefits in terms of efficiency, in terms of gas savings, in terms of combating climate change and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, I think the health issue is rising to prominence, and rightfully so. So all this to say that I think time is right to add these perspectives to the negotiations, which will begin quite soon. And just to touch upon the question asked by Thibault, I mean, we're in a phase now where we will very soon from Parliament's side come out with the draft report by the rapporteur, and the political groups will feed into this before summer already. So we do have and will have quite soon a clearer picture about the ambitions and where Parliament would be on this important topic, as well as to which extent these issues on health, environment, and the health aspects of living in buildings will be incorporated in this. So I'm somewhat optimistic in terms of integrating these issues and on the level of ambition, but still very curious to see the reactions and response from all the other political groups when we see all the stuff coming in June and July. So it's very timely with this debate, and let's make sure that we factor this in the work that's ahead of us. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Rocher, I know you want to jump in here. So do you feel that there is an incentive right now for building owners, for landlords, to remodel more sustainably and improve the quality of life of the people living in or inhabiting those buildings?
I think that as it is now, the text doesn't make sufficient difference between different categories of owners. And you can't imagine that a single family who owns the place they live will have the same incentives or the same capacity or the same finance to renovate buildings compared to, let's say, a bank who owns multiple families, residential buildings in the city center. So fine-tuning a bit the approach and fine-tuning a bit what to expect from different owners to achieve, I think, is missing, but I believe that there will be a lot of work from the Parliament on that side to really improve or detail the text further. There is a placeholder, of course, in the article, I believe 15 on finance and enabling framework. So I'm sure that MEPs will be creative and come up with a variety of really well-adapted solutions. One last point I wanted to make was, it's in the energy efficiency of buildings directive, but I believe it's deeply connected with the EPBD, is the role of public buildings, the exemplary role of public authorities in the renovation of public buildings. If you want to act fast to ensure that renovation benefits to the most vulnerable, then you need to include social housing in the scope of the mandatory renovations. There should be the first group to be targeted, because there you have a clear case of concrete solution to lift people off energy poverty, and I really hope to see that provision of public buildings renovation end up with a broad scope and really deliver in a way that citizens can see how climate action benefits them, and citizens can see how European action is also beneficial for them. I think it's going to be very important for Europe's image in the coming years.
Okay, Elizabeth Hoffman, I know that you want to jump in here. You want to talk about the advice that could be given to building owners.
Yeah, maybe first fully agree with what Adeline just said also on social housing, and also the need really to have some targeted financial support and overcoming the issue with like split incentives to help like some of those people that are living or that are energy poor and living in those kind of circumstances. And of course, in the EPBD proposal, there's quite a few aspects that can help address some of it, like some of the building tools, if we manage to link it to important trigger points. So when there's people changing apartments and all these kind of things. One point that often is forgotten, and with one-stop shops, we do try to address, is the fact that we need to have more and better advice to support building owners, and that's both landlords, but also tenants, sometimes to get the right information in the right format at the right time, because very often people simply do not know where to look for the advice. And hence, when they plan renovation projects, they're not taking all aspects into consideration. And that's another point that I briefly want to make, is the fact that the building tools that we currently have are not really tailored to what motivates people to take action, because we can do a lot of talking about the need for energy efficiency, and I think we all agree that we need to do it, but ultimately it's the people that need to take the money and that need to invest, and sometimes the investment costs a lot of money. So we need to be better at tailoring and designing those tools in a way that they can that they respond to them and that they take action, because that's what we ultimately want to do.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, we're going to go to an audience question. It's from John Taylor, and it's for Thibaut Roy from the European Commission. He says that David's research, the CEO from Velux, identified 34 million suffer excess cold. the European Commission must be, EE must be the first step. He said that buildings vary widely. Does the panel still think we should prevent citizens from using high temperature hot water heating with a boiler, even if it's with a renewable fuel in all cases? Thibaut Roy, what do you make of that question?
To be totally honest, I'm not sure I fully understood the question. But
so you say that in the research it was identified that 34 million people suffer from excess cold. And I think what he's trying to say here is that should we then prevent people from using high temperature hot water heating, even if it's with a renewable source boiler?
Indeed, lack of a warm environment is a very crucial issue, also as mentioned by David at the beginning of the event. And we have to make sure at EU level, but also at national level, that this is addressed properly as a priority. And we believe that some key proposals in the EPBD adopted text in December do address that, in particular the one on minimum energy performance standards, on MEPS, which will mean that the worst performing buildings, so those with an EPC, an energy performance class G or F, will have to be lifted up to better performance, which means that they will require less energy because they will be less exposed to the outside environment and to the cold outside the home. So we believe that's a very important first element, that the ambition level on MEPS is at least upheld to precisely address this issue, which affect energy poor citizens, which for their majority live in those buildings. Now, on the heating systems specifically, as you know, we also propose to stop subsidies to fossil fuel-based boilers as of 2027. That's in the EPBD proposal. The reason for that is that we believe that there are very cost-efficient alternatives on the market, such as heat pumps. And the heat pump galaxy includes obviously self-standing systems, which can replace altogether the fossil fuel-based boilers. But it also includes, let's say, add-in components that can be brought on top, added to, for example, the gas boiler, so that the two work in combination, in particular when the person in his or her home really faces a very cold day and needs the two of them to work together to heat the home properly. So let me say very clearly that
I mean, sorry to cut you off there. I know that MEP Peterson has to leave. So if you could just jump in, if you'd like to comment and also wrap up any final comments before you leave, that'd be great.
No, I think I would adhere to what Thibaut said, and I think it's important to bear in mind that we're in a situation where I think 20 out of 27 member states subsidize gas boilers as of today. And clearly, in the light of the tragedy, the terrible war in Ukraine, this is not for the future. So we will have to look into heat pumps and how to facilitate and ensure the uptake of heat pumps. And adding to this, we will also have to look at issues like hydronic balancing in order to ensure that we actually can control temperatures in the houses much more than we're capable of today. And I'm sure you've all seen the estimates from IEA and other sources saying that by lowering room temperatures with 1 degree, we'll be able to save like 6-7% of our gas imports from Russia. So there are tremendous perspectives in the issue of heat control, of room control, hydronic balancing, and what have you. And not least, as Thibaut rightfully so alluded to, this substitution of gas boilers and going into heat pumps, which by the way could turn out to be I mean, there are industrial perspectives in this on a European level as well, if we do this right. So all this to say that I think this discussion that we're having is extremely timely, and I'm looking forward to stay in touch with all of you and the stakeholders in this interesting industry. So thanks so much for this. I have to run into another meeting right away. Apologies for this. Thanks so much for having me this morning. I wish you a good meeting. Thanks.
Thank you so much, and it's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much there to MEP Morten Petersen for joining us in this debate. Adeline Rocher, let me come to you now. Now, of course, decent, affordable housing is really key, but across Europe and really across the world, we know that there are cowboys and plus landlords in particular. This is something we haven't quite touched on yet, the landlords. All of you have spoken about renovation being key, of renovating, especially old buildings that really aren't fit for purpose as we go forward. But what if those landlords then increase the cost to tenants so that the tenant is then essentially paying for the upgrade of the flat or the building? How could the reform of this legislation perhaps prevent that from happening, or can it not do that?
I'm not sure this can be directly addressed by the EU framework. I think a lot of housing policy, which are different from buildings policy, are still in the hands of member states. And I would be cautious on regulating too much into too much details, because we have seen already some pushback from some member states who are a bit reluctant in the name of the subsidiarity principle. So I would tend to keep a cautious approach there. That said, having a few safeguards in the EU legislation to say that it's very important that affordability of buildings remains at the heart of the buildings policy is going to be important. There's another policy that we haven't discussed, and I know that I don't want to open the Pandora box when we have only a few minutes left, but the upcoming Social Climate Fund should also help cover some of the renovation costs to prevent leaky houses and to ensure that the heating fuel consumptions is reduced financed by a carbon price on heating fuels. There is also some discussions around using cohesion money to ease the renovation wave, to fund the necessary skills, to fund the necessary supply chains in Europe. There is also discussion on what to do with the remaining money of the national resilience and recovery plans. So there is also a discussion on, if you want to make sure that the most vulnerable are shielded against steep rent increase, there is a bit of space, I think, for public support targeted, I insist on targeted, for the most vulnerable inhabitants.
Okay, lovely. Well, let's pick up on that with our remaining panelists. Elizabeth Hoffman, let me come to you first, but Mr. Roy, you can also add on after Ms. Hoffman. What I want to also talk about is, living costs. They're rising dramatically. I mean, we can't necessarily fix deprivation, and this one legislation isn't, the fix-all approach. But with so many people living in a kind of survival mode, living paycheck to paycheck, with all these crises going on, especially the energy crisis, what would you say is a fix to help potentially the poorest of society live a better life? I know that there's a project in Belgium that you also wanted to highlight.
Yes, very briefly. I think very often when people hear, also when we talk about the need for a holistic approach to buildings, they do think that this must always come with a very high bill, so that this must be very expensive, and that this also doesn't go together, let's say, with social housing. And that's why, like we as Velux, we were involved in, it started in 2016 in a social housing project in Belgium, in Anderlecht, where our objective was to show that you can do a budget-focused renovation with what we call the active house principle in mind, so the energy, environment, but also the health parameters. And so far, we have renovated 6 buildings there. And we could see that this didn't mean increased cost. It just requires a different approach and a different planning process. And again, like the point that I made before, that's just something that we currently don't do. And going back to your other question before about the issue with costs, I think one very important aspect here, and that also goes back to the question around boilers that you mentioned before, is that we do need a thorough approach, that we can't do just one-off investments. It's not enough just to replace boilers or to install heat pumps. We do need a focused approach. We do need an improved building envelope first, so that all these other measures that we have to do will work out, and that's something that is very important.
Okay, Thibault Roy, let's come to you next. For you to comment on that, but also there is a question again from someone who's watching online. They've said that how will the EU Green Deal building renovation program make sure that renovations will be circular? The focus seems to be on energy reduction, CO2 reduction, but of course this reduction must also come from circularity. So reduce, reuse, recycle. Your comments, please.
Sure. Maybe to jump straight on this question from the audience. We have several pieces of legislation in the Fit for 55 package that aim to bring in this level of ambition on circularity. If you talk about construction products, the very recently adopted construction products regulation does address durability, circularity, reusability, all the circularity dimensions of the product that we use and we will use in our buildings. That's the first element on construction products. Then we also need appliances in our buildings, obviously, not only boilers, but lights, dishwashers, and so on and so forth. And for those ones, we are already starting to regulate their life cycle impacts and the circularity considerations with the Eco-Design Directive, which will be transformed into the Eco-Design Regulation, and also with our energy labeling regulation, which really aims to give a score to the appliances that we buy from A to G, aiming to really pull the market to the best performing products. And in that context, it's also important to recall that subsidies from public authorities already today can only go to the products which are at the top of their energy class. So we think it's also a very important consideration. Now, on the overall impact of the building, new buildings as part of the EPBD proposal will also have to report on their life cycle emissions. And we think it's also a very important first step, let's say, in that regard. Just a last word on this question. Member states also incentivize, as part of the energy performance certificates, the EPC that they will develop. And we have provided a template for that purpose to include elements related to circularity to be indicated on those EPCs. Then, if I may quickly on, let's say, financing and the enabling conditions. So very important, I believe, to recall that the Commission has been working on the review of the state aid rules. We have made, and we are also still on the general block exemption regulation side, the GBER, trying to make them more conducive, allowing for a higher threshold, wider scope of aids to buildings, for example, to comply with minimum energy performance standards. And quickly to comment on Adeline's and Elizabeth's comments on tools to ensure that tenants and energy poor citizens are not hurt by the transition. we indeed propose some measures in the EPBD revision, but we also think indeed that for some of those issues, this is a matter for member states. They have a specific context, they have historical developments, and they know how best to address those. So we provide, let's say, a toolbox of financing instruments, of suggestions as to reviews of the national laws, but it will also be for member states individually to identify and act on those key issues.
Okay, thank you so much, Thibault Roy, and thank you also for summing up what the Commission is proposing through this legislative reform. Thank you so much. Okay, and then just quickly, ladies, I'd like you to give your final comments if possible. We are a little bit running over time, but Adeline Rocher, please go ahead. Very quickly, please.
I think we are living a very exciting policy moment because I don't think that we've ever seen such a breadth of policy files discussed at the same time, and consistency will be key. But I also see a great potential for the Fit for 55 package, the Green Deal, to deliver for the EU citizen. It's very important also that whatever is discussed tomorrow in the Repower context, that will have the necessary short-term measures to drastically cut energy demand in Europe, that it's still aligned with the more structural, longer-term tools that will be implemented through the Fit for 55 package. So I really hope that this consistency and this sense of destination, where do we want to be in 10 years, 20 years, in 2050, that we don't lose sight of the destination. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And then just lastly, Elizabeth Hoffman, please, the floor very quickly, please.
Yes, very quickly. Just to add, yes, indeed, a very unique moment that we're in at the moment. Also a very busy one, of course, given that all the EU legislation is up for revision, but also the fact that we have all this money that is coming from the National Recovery and Resilience Plans, and then hopefully also soon from the new Social Climate Fund. We do have that real opportunity to change our building stock and to turn it into sustainable and healthy buildings. So there's just one thing that I could ask for. It would be to ensure a clearer definition of what a healthy indoor climate is, so that we're all talking about the same thing when we're using those words. Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, no, thank you, and thanks to all of you, and of course to everyone who's watching online. We're going to have to leave it there, but Thibault Roy, MEP Morten Petersen, Martin Pej-Rimovsky, Adeline Rocher, Elizabeth Hoffman, and of course David Briggs. Thank you all so much for being part of this discussion this morning. And to everyone, of course, who is watching online, I hope that what you've seen has given you a flavour of the debate, an important debate surrounding sustainable and healthy buildings. I'm Mariam Zaidi, and you've been watching a Euractiv debate supported by Velec Care, and bye-bye.